Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. This is my kitchen series. So in today's video, I'm actually going to be showing you guys how to do the floors. So my kitchen and dining room are basically in one space. So it will be like a kitchen slash dining room. I already did like my dining room makeover, but the floor part wasn't included. So if you guys didn't get to check that video out, make sure you hit the links in the description box and I have the video linked there for you guys. With the kitchen, I have been wanting to do these floors for quite a while. I didn't really know what floors to go with. I had to do a lot of research to make sure I was making the right decision because, you know, they're the kitchen floors and I spent a lot of time in here, so I wanted it to go with the aesthetic of what I was trying to make the kitchen look like. Finally, we landed on something. All right, well, let's just get into the meat of the video and what we're here for. So I'm going to be breaking down the video into a couple different parts. So the first part, I'm going to be showing you guys how to remove the trim. So I will be saving my trim and like reinstalling it. Hopefully it all works out. So I'm going to show you guys how to remove the trim without damaging your sheetrock and your wall. I already did like a test piece, so I know that it works. And that's it. Without further ado, let's just get into this video. And here's a quick look at what the floors look like currently. This material is supposed to make the floors look like they're tile, but they are not tile at all. It's just one large sheet of vinyl. And this same material was in my master bathroom and it was also in my kids / guest bathroom. And I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. And I'm really glad that I'm finally tackling this project. I just don't like how the floors have like that beige color, but there's like a glossy sheen on them. So anyway, I'm really glad I'm tackling the floors now. The first thing I'm going to do is label the trim. I'm writing out the numbers on painter's tape with a Sharpie. So each number I'm writing twice and I'll show you why in a second. All right, so for the first part of this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to remove the trim. This is the easiest way that I found how to do it. I'm going to be saving this trim, so I'm going to be like reinstalling it so I don't have to buy new trim and cut it and everything. It's already cut. So I got a couple different tools, like a knife. I also bought this putty knife because it has like a nice thin edge, a mallet, this multi-purpose trim puller. All right, so the trim has like, this is like caulk and the caulk is almost works like glue. So we basically want to cut it so that we're cutting the caulk basically off of the trim. And you may have to cut the caulk a few times like I did. Then I use the putty knife to slide between the wall and the trim to make sure the trim puller can fit in there. Next, I use the trim puller with the mallet and using pressure to make sure I push down so that the trim can basically loosen up from the wall. Also a note, I was being pretty careful when I was using the trim puller because I didn't want to damage the wall or the trim since I was planning on reusing it. So remember that painter's tape? Here's what I'm doing with it. I think I may have mentioned that I'm going to be keeping my trim and reinstalling it. So to make it easier for myself, labeling where each piece went would save me some time and frustration. So I'm labeling the wall and then I'm also labeling the actual trim so I'm able to put it back together when it's time to do that. So now let's time lapse this and I'll show you how I remove the rest of the trim from the walls. I have to tell you, removing trim or any type of project that requires you getting up and down, working on your knees is not for the faint of heart. For this part of the floor project, I mostly squatted, but I definitely felt more of the exhaustion because I was using a lot of upper body strength, trying to take off the trim and using that trimmer, that trim puller, and plus I wore a sweatshirt, which I literally have no idea why. I was like burning up the whole time, but I kept on going because I wanted to finish this part of the project and I didn't want to like psych myself out before I was able to finish it. Oh, goodness gracious. So some parts of the trim was a little harder to remove than others, and I had to take a breather in between removing it from the walls, especially the longer ones. So anyway, once I finally got the hang of it, I felt more comfortable putting a little bit more pressure on the trim puller, and then it was easier to remove the trim from the walls. I did find a few tips along the way, and I want to share those with you. For this section, I already took off number 8. It's kind of hard to get in here because of like this can't really fit. So I'm going to kind of do it a different way. I'm gonna peel the caulk with the knife. And then I'm gonna see if this works, like just putting this in on the side here. Okay, and that works. Okay, and here is another tip. So sometimes it's hard to get these off. All right, so this has like a little groove on it. What you want to do is put that onto the nail and pull, and it helps it come off. So I just finished taking off of all the trim from the kitchen area, and I was contemplating whether I would do the dining room or not, but I'm like, you know what? I actually am doing like a pretty good job. I'm in a good groove. So I'm just gonna do the dining room as well. And then that way I know all the trim is taken care of. And this is what I like to do. I like to like take my time doing stuff, especially when it's like my first time doing it. So the whole project for today is just taking the trim off, and then tomorrow is a new day, and then I'll do that. So let's just finish doing that real quick, and then I'll show you guys how I move my furniture and stuff, and then make it easier for myself. Okay, let's go. The first thing I do is wiggle the sideboard out of the way, and then I label the rest of the borders before taking them off. Next, I'm moving my dream cart and dream box out of the way so I can label the rest of the borders that's in the dining room before moving on to removing the trim. Sometimes tackling home projects and DIY projects can take up a lot of time, which can sometimes make you anxious. I have personally dealt with the anxiety side of this, so I want to tell you more about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. So thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy service, and it's 100% online. And in case you missed it, it is BetterHelp, H-E-L-P. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone call, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for you for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at a more affordable price. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Niky, and I've also included my link below in the description box. So if you are someone who is working on your home and trying to do it stress-free, make sure you check out my special discount and link in the description box below. All right, now back to the video. So I removed all the trim behind the sideboard area, and then I moved on to the last spots along the dining room. Another note is I'm making sure I'm cleaning as I go so it's less mess to clean up at the end. One last thing to note about the trim, on the longer parts of the trim, I didn't want the trim to snap in half. Sometimes it felt like it was like kind of giving a little bit. So I was making sure I took my time to make sure that didn't happen. When I wanted to do my floors, the first thing that scared me was removing the trim. I didn't really know what to do, where to start. So I just got to Googling and found this trim puller, and it really did work pretty easily for this whole project. Yes, all done, finally. One of the other reasons why I was a little nervous to like start the floor project because I didn't realize how simple it was to take off the trim. I was a little scared about that. Like, I don't want to mess it up and not be able to put it back. I don't want to damage the walls, you know. So after doing some research and finding out that was like a pretty easy way to take out the trim without damaging my walls, I'm happy I did my research and, you know, came up with the method that worked for me. So yeah. That's it for day one. I will see you guys back here tomorrow to finish up the floors. Well, not to finish up. This is going to take a couple days, but, you know, to get started on the floors, and I'll walk you guys through that process as well. This is my first time doing this type of flooring, but I'm pretty excited about it, and I think it's going to turn out really nice. So, see you tomorrow. Peace. And to keep all of my pieces organized, I'm putting them inside this box. And the bigger pieces I have in the garage laying out. Okay, so wait, why is the camera like this? So this is basically how I chose my flooring. I went to Home Depot and I bought 2 large size cases of different color woods. This is the second round of it. The first one I got was really yellow and I just did not like it. It just didn't look good. And then I got this one I ordered online, and this as well I ordered online. I like to compare it in real life with the large like slats because they look different online, and then when you actually get them, you can see that some of them are different colors. So I like to see that variation in real life. Also, the light colored one, I realized like I kind of thought I wanted them light, but I don't like how it reminds me of the flooring I already have, and I'm kind of over it, so I wanted something a little different. So I'm actually going to go with the darker one. So to get started, I'm setting the 3 different sizes that the floors come with into separate piles. This will help me stay organized for when I need a specific floor plank to stick with the pattern I'm going to go with. I start by laying the floors in the main kitchen area, but I realized that this was a mistake, which I do discuss later on in the video. I should have started in the far corner in the dining room, but I didn't realize this until it was too late. I start by vacuuming the perimeter around the dining room to make sure there was no leftover debris from when I removed the trim from the wall. I love this wireless vacuum by Black & Decker. It comes in handy all the time. This vacuum cleaner was definitely a lifesaver throughout this whole project, and I'll link this in the description box below. Since I had already done the kitchen as I mentioned before, I laid out the floor planks in a pattern that would match up to what I had already done. This way I knew which floor planks would go where and how much space I had that would eventually line up to the partition that was right in the middle. One of my fears was everything not lining up right into that small space right there, and I talk about that a little bit more later in the video. Once I had majority of the floor laid out for reference, I tested the cutting 2 ways. I saw someone say you could use a box cutter to cut these floors, so I definitely wanted to try it. I used a box cutter to score a line on the back of the panel and also on the front, scoring until it snapped. It did work, but that method was pretty rough on my hands. Once it was cut, I laid the cut edge along the wall so that part was not exposed. Along the side of the dining room are vents, so I took the vent out, traced the cutout area on top of a grocery store bag, and then laid where the flooring would meet on top so I could basically mark it and then cut that part out with the saw. This video is sped up, so it made it look like it took no time at all, but in reality, this took me a while to do. I wanted it to be precise, so it took me some time to make sure the measurements were right. I'm sure there's a better way to do this, but because I had 3 pieces of flooring meeting right in the middle on top of that vent, I just wanted to make sure this was cut correctly the first time. All right, y'all, my makeshift workshop, here we go. Oh, let me get my goggles. Once I was confident in my measurements for the vents lining up, I used the Ryobi jigsaw. You can use a table saw to do this, but the jigsaw was where my comfort zone lied. I felt like I had a lot of control over it and it was just easy to use. I'm someone who has not used a lot of power tools, so this is just like kind of like my segue into it. And yes, I am using it in my dining room / kitchen area. This floor has a thick layer of rubber material underneath it because it is waterproof. So the rubber kind of got all over the place, but not so much sawdust or wood. Making sure the vent cover lined up was important because if it wasn't, the actual vent would not fit into the space. This is why using spacers along the wall is a great idea. I actually end up using 2 different types of spacers, but the wood shims were the best spacer in my opinion. Installing these click-lock floors were pretty simple. Once the initial edge was laid down, the following rows became much easier to install. It is very tempting to work in one section, but I highly recommend working in one straight line and then go to the following row. I actually did this when I did the whole kitchen side, and it was just so much harder to fix my mistakes. So don't do it the wrong way like I did. Do it the right way, just going in the row. I had learned my lesson doing it the second time in the dining room the correct way, and I'll show you guys how to fix a mistake if you do end up doing it how I did it. I hope that makes sense. Today's day 4 and I'm basically picking up where I left off last night. I'm gonna just go in the row here and hopefully be done with everything by today. So not much of an intro, but without further ado, let's just get into day 4. The vent on the opposite side of the dining room lined up differently, so this one was way easier to cut out with the jigsaw. I got all the way to the end of the row and then cut the edge off from the last floorboard that I didn't need, and I basically repeated this throughout the rest of the project. To tap the floor planks into place, I'm using a tapping block and a hammer. You can use a soft mallet cap hammer, but I didn't have one, so I'm using a regular hammer. I did try to use the rubber mallet, but I did not get the same tight lock in with the floors. Also, I picked up a floor installation kit and it came with a pull bar that I use later on for tight spaces. And this is not technically how you're supposed to do the floor. You're supposed to do it every row so you won't end up with the same situation I'm in. What happened was, since I had already put some of the floorboards in, when I went to do this, it wouldn't really fit in. So I have to like slide it in, and it's a little tight because this one's already in. So I just had to use a tapping block. And this was the mistake that I have referenced before, and after having to fix this one, I learned from my mistake. It took forever to hammer this part in, so this is why you're supposed to do one full row at a time and just move on to the next row until the full row is completed. And here I am just finishing up this row and another row, and also a quick look at how I go back and forth to the saw to make sure each row is completed fully. Okay, and here is how the floors are looking so far. I was able to like cut off the excess to get it to line up here in the corner and right along this edge. So I like cut it so it goes around this column here. Still working on these, but I also was able to get all the way up until the edge of the dining room. So now I have to fix. So now that I lined up the dining room, I am noticing that the corner here is supposed to be like a skinny sliver. So I think I have to like take up this first row somehow. I am a little nervous because I didn't necessarily want to pick up all the work I did, but it might be looking like that. And that's kind of trial and error. You live and you learn. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I should have started in the far corner of the dining room with the floors because now my floor planks did not align properly. I had to cut super skinny planks so that the edges could line up. Because they were very thin, I used a nail gun to secure a few of the skinny floorboards in. At first, I was kind of embarrassed that I had to use this, thinking I was doing something wrong. But at the end of the day, I realized that the part I had used the brad nailer on would be covered up anyway with the trim and the corner rounds. So it really wasn't that bad. At first, I was highly annoyed for making such a huge mistake, but once I started laying the floors back down, it was actually easy. I would say it was even a little better because I was able to swap out floor planks that I didn't really like that much. And another plus was because I went with the H pattern for my floors, it was easy to have them already laid out. So I was able to make sure that no seams lined up with another seam, and I was able to just pick one up and tap it right into place. And here's just a tip for when I was working around the door frame by the pantry area. I created a makeshift stencil so I could cut around the part that needed to go around the door frame. So we did end up moving the refrigerator so I could mop behind. You guys see the sneak peek of what color it used to be. I actually didn't remove the fridge when I actually painted the kitchen. But I probably will change that in the future. For tight spaces behind the fridge and along the cabinet, I did need the pull bar and mallet. For this space, it worked perfectly. And here is what my progress looks like behind the refrigerator. I didn't take off the trim, I just left it and then put the flooring behind it. After the flooring was installed behind the fridge, we rolled it back into place to free up some space. This is one thing about me, I clean as I go and I only focus on one project at a time. So this is also why I didn't go get the paint to paint behind the fridge when it was moved. This is what my workspace is looking like. These are the little particles that have come off when I was sawing, and it's also on the floor. I actually end up sweeping it up. I do this every night. I sweep it up so I start with a nice clean workspace. There's a pile of swept up. And I basically do that every night so I start with a nice clean workspace. This is how my workspace looks once I was done cleaning it for the night. And I basically clean up after myself every night to make it easier when I start in the morning. There were a couple of corner rounds under the cabinet area. I removed those so that I could finish the remainder of the floors. I also got behind the stove similar to how I worked around the fridge. So it's cleanup time. I'm saving a few of the floorboards, so I'm packing up what I could use in the future. Of course, I'm sweeping up and then also vacuuming up the tiny little particles. Remember in the beginning of the video when I mentioned I will be saving and reusing my trim? Well, I successfully removed it and now it's time to reinstall it. So to reinstall it, I'm first removing the old caulk. I'm lightly scraping the top of the trim just using a box cutter. It comes off really easily. I'm also using the same method on any other areas of the trim that might have had a lot of caulk buildup on it. The next step is to use a wire cutter or nose plier to pull out the nails. The key to this is pulling the nails from the back so it minimizes holes in the front. I do recommend using gloves for this part. I did not have working gloves before, but I finally picked some up. The larger finishing nails have to be removed, but sometimes the smaller nails are like bent in, and when a few didn't come out for me, I ended up using the wire cutter to cut as close as possible so that the trim would lay smooth against the wall. And then finally, I'm cleaning up the area on the wall where you can tell where the old caulk line was. So I actually use a few different methods for this. I used the box cutter to try and peel off some of the caulk that was on the wall, but the best method I found was actually using the putty knife because it just glided right across the wall and I was able to like remove all the caulk without any issues. And of course, after everything was all removed, I cleaned up the debris before installing the trim. Labeling the trim was a lifesaver. All I had to do was match up the numbers that I had marked, and then I used the brad nailer to secure the trim to the wall. I then worked my way around the whole kitchen and dining room to just making sure each and every trim was secured to the wall. Okay, so it has been a few days. The floors are done. They are looking really good, but I have to finish the trim, and actually, I don't even know why those stickers are still on there. Let me take those off now. So now that that's done, I'm gonna take some finishing nails and a hammer and just put a few of these in the trim. I only use a couple of finishing nails on the sides and maybe just like one or two in the middle just to make sure it was really secure into the wall. To hide the holes and nails in the trim, I'm using this fill stick to cover up and fill in the area where the nail or holes are exposed. I usually use Drydex for something like this, but this time I just wanted to try out something new. For the final steps to making the floors look professionally installed, I put down frog tape all around the floor. I then painted the trim with ultra pure white and a semi-gloss. Once the paint dried, I used caulk to make sure that it looked really nice and seamless. I did use a caulk gun and a caulk finishing kit to help me get that seamless edge look and also to help clean up anything that was overspilling, especially on the edges where the two corners met. And here's just a quick reminder of what the floors used to look like. These floors had a faux tile look, but were just one sheet of vinyl. And this is what the floors look like now. I am so proud that I finally finished this flooring project. My husband was a really great help in assisting me on the color. I just couldn't make a decision, but we finally came to one and I'm glad I chose this darker brown color. I think the darker brown complements my space a little bit more. I definitely feel like we leveled up their kitchen now that the floors have been updated. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to see the future kitchen projects that I have planned because this kitchen is not done. Also, make sure you follow me on Instagram to catch more behind the scenes and creative lifestyle posts. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Oh my goodness gracious, did I leave him jump downstairs? What was I gonna say? I'm like out of breath. I wanted to, what did I wanna do? I'm a little bit